Daniel Carter could barely keep his eyes open. The commuter train rattled through the city before sunrise, carrying hundreds of exhausted workers toward another busy day. Outside the windows, the sky was still dark. Inside, nearly everyone stared silently at their phones or leaned against the seats with tired expressions. Daniel sat near the back of the carriage, his worn laptop bag resting beside his feet. He had slept less than 3 hours. Again. His 6-year-old son, Ethan, had developed a high fever during the night. Daniel spent hours sitting beside his bed, changing cold towels, checking his temperature, and waiting until the medicine finally began working. At 4:30 in the morning, Ethan had smiled weakly. "I'm okay now, Dad." Daniel kissed his forehead. "Try to get some more sleep." He quietly left the apartment only after Ethan's elderly neighbor, Mrs. Lewis, arrived to watch him for a few hours. Missing work wasn't an option. Not anymore. Daniel had once been one of the brightest operations analysts in the logistics industry. Years earlier, he managed supply chains for a multinational company, earning promotions faster than anyone expected. Everything changed after his wife passed away unexpectedly. He resigned from his executive position because constant travel meant leaving Ethan alone too often. Since then, Daniel accepted temporary consulting jobs and freelance projects that allowed him to stay close to his son. The work paid less. Much less. But every afternoon, he was there when Ethan finished school. To Daniel, that mattered more than titles. This particular Tuesday morning, he was traveling to an interview with Hawthorne Dynamics, a manufacturing company searching for someone to reorganize its struggling operations. The opportunity could finally provide stability. Health insurance. Regular hours. A future that didn't depend on short-term contracts. Daniel opened a folder containing notes he had prepared for weeks. Inventory flow charts. Cost-saving ideas. Production scheduling improvements. He quietly reviewed them while fighting exhaustion. Across the aisle sat a woman wearing a simple gray coat. Unlike the other passengers, she wasn't looking at her phone. Instead, she occasionally glanced toward Daniel as he rubbed his tired eyes and tried to stay awake. Her name was Victoria Bennett. No one on the train recognized her. Without the tailored business suits and security team she usually traveled with, she looked like any ordinary commuter. Victoria was the CEO of Hawthorne Dynamics. She often rode public transportation anonymously once or twice each month. It helped her understand how ordinary people experienced the city. She believed leadership became dangerous when surrounded only by boardrooms and private drivers. As the train continued, Daniel's head slowly began to droop. He jerked awake once. Then again. Finally, after nearly 40 hours of balancing work, parenting, and worry, exhaustion won. His eyes closed. A moment later, the movement of the train caused him to lean sideways. His head gently rested against the shoulder of the woman beside him. Several nearby passengers looked over. One teenager quietly smiled. Another commuter expected the woman to shove him away. Victoria simply looked at Daniel's exhausted face. Dark circles surrounded his eyes. His shirt was neatly pressed despite obvious wear. One sleeve carried a faint stain, as though he had hurriedly cleaned medicine from it earlier that morning. She noticed something else. Clutched tightly in his hand was a child's drawing. A stick figure holding hands with a taller one beneath a bright yellow sun. Across the top, written in uneven blue crayon, were the words, "Good luck at your interview, Daddy." Victoria felt her heart tighten. She remained perfectly still. She didn't want to wake him. For almost 20 minutes, Daniel slept more peacefully than he had in weeks. The train finally approached Central Station. The announcement echoed through the carriage. Daniel suddenly woke. Realizing where his head had been resting, he immediately sat upright. "Oh. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean." His face turned bright red with embarrassment. Victoria smiled kindly. "You looked like you needed the sleep." "I probably did. I hope I wasn't bothering you." "You weren't." Daniel quickly gathered his papers. I've had a difficult night. My son was sick. I guess I underestimated how tired I was. Victoria nodded. I hope he's feeling better. He is. Thank you. The train stopped. Passengers began leaving. Daniel turned one last time. I really appreciate your kindness. She smiled warmly. Good luck with your interview. He laughed softly. I have a feeling I'm going to need it. Neither of them realized they were walking toward the exact same building. 20 minutes later, Daniel entered the Victoria stared at the resume lying on the conference table. Daniel Carter. She looked at the attached photograph. It was unmistakably the exhausted man from the train. The same kind eyes. The same worn briefcase. The same quiet determination. One board member noticed her pause. Is there a problem with the candidate? Victoria smiled slightly. No. I've already met him. The executives exchanged puzzled glances. You know him? Not exactly. But I know something about his character. Half an hour later, Daniel was escorted into the interview room. He stopped for a brief moment when he saw the woman from the train sitting at the head of the table. His eyes widened. You? Victoria smiled warmly. Good morning, Mr. Carter. Daniel looked from her to the board members. Then back again. You work here. One executive chuckled. Mr. Carter. This is Victoria Bennett. Our CEO. Daniel felt his face grow warm. He remembered falling asleep on her shoulder. I am so sorry about this morning. Victoria shook her head. You already apologized. Please have a seat. Daniel sat down, still embarrassed. The interview began with the usual questions. His education. His previous leadership roles. His experience managing large-scale logistics systems. Daniel answered calmly. When asked how he would reduce operational costs, he walked to the whiteboard. Within minutes, he sketched a completely new inventory flow system. He explained how unnecessary warehouse transfers were costing the company millions each year. He identified production bottlenecks. Suggested supplier consolidation. Recommended digital tracking methods that could improve delivery accuracy while reducing waste. The room grew silent. Board members stopped taking notes and simply listened. When Daniel finished, one executive asked, How long did it take you to prepare this presentation? Daniel smiled. About 6 years. The executive looked confused. Daniel explained. I developed these ideas while consulting for different companies. Every project taught me something. I kept improving the system. Victoria leaned forward. Then why weren't you working for a major corporation? Daniel hesitated. I was. I left. Why? My wife passed away. My son needed me more than my career did. The room became quiet. I chose flexible work. It paid less. But I never missed his school events. Victoria remembered the crayon drawing in his hand on the train. Everything suddenly made sense. The sleepless eyes. The worn clothes. The exhaustion. It wasn't carelessness. It was sacrifice. After Daniel left the room, the board immediately began discussing the remaining candidates. One director frowned. His ideas are excellent. But his resume has employment gaps. Another added. He hasn't held an executive title in years. Several people nodded. Victoria listened quietly. Then she spoke. Yesterday, this company lost another major client. We've tried hiring impressive resumes. We've tried expensive consultants. We've tried executives with perfect career histories. She paused. None of them solved our problems. She placed Daniel's resume in the center of the table. This man solved operational problems before we even asked him. And this morning, he accidentally showed me something even more valuable. The directors looked puzzled. Victoria smiled. He was so exhausted that he fell asleep on my shoulder during the train ride. A few people laughed softly. She continued. Do you know what his first words were when he woke up? I'm sorry. He wasn't embarrassed because it might affect his interview. He was worried that he had inconvenienced a complete stranger. She folded her hands. Skill can be taught. Integrity cannot. The vote was unanimous. That afternoon, Daniel received a phone call. Mr. Carter. We'd like to offer you the position of Director of Operations. For several seconds, he couldn't speak. Are you sure? We're very sure. When he hung up, Ethan ran into the living room. Dad. What happened? Daniel smiled through tears. I got the job. Ethan jumped into his father's arms. I knew you would. Life slowly changed. Not overnight. But steadily. Daniel's new schedule allowed him to take Ethan to school every morning. They no longer worried about unpaid medical bills. For the first time in years, Daniel slept through an entire night. At Hawthorne Dynamics, his ideas quickly transformed the company. Production delays dropped dramatically. Employee morale improved. Warehouses became more efficient. Within 18 months, the company returned to profitability. During a company celebration, a reporter asked Victoria, "What convinced you to hire Daniel Carter?" She smiled. It wasn't because he slept on my shoulder. Everyone laughed. It was because I saw a father who had spent every ounce of his energy caring for someone else, and still showed up prepared to do his very best. Daniel stood quietly beside his team. He wasn't interested in applause. He was thinking about Ethan waiting at home for movie night. As he prepared to leave the celebration early, Victoria stopped him. Leaving already? Daniel smiled. I promised my son would build a model airplane tonight. She laughed. Go. The company will survive without you for one evening. Months later, Ethan visited the office during Family Day. He proudly introduced himself to Victoria. Thank you. She smiled. For what? For letting my dad sleep. She laughed. I didn't really do anything. Ethan shook his head. You did. He says kindness helps people keep going. Victoria looked at Daniel. I think he's right. Years later, employees still told the story of the CEO who let an exhausted stranger sleep on her shoulder before discovering he was the leader her struggling company had been searching for. People assumed the story was about luck. But it wasn't. It was about seeing the humanity in someone before judging their appearance, recognizing quiet resilience behind visible exhaustion, and understanding that the strongest leaders are often those who have learned responsibility not in boardrooms, but in the everyday work of loving and caring for their families.